those with loaded guns, and those who dig. In this world, there's...
What is up, everybody? Welcome to Outlawed Thoughts. Unfortunately, the two guests just dropped, so we're going to wait for them to join in. But we're going to be joined tonight by Hector Ruse from Florida, as well as Kareem Mays, our co-host, obviously. We're going to be talking about a couple different topics, including this latest DeSantis move to fly migrants into other states. We're going to talk a little bit about immigration. But after that, we are talking about a very important figure in kind of Alaska culture, and in my opinion, a person who should be important in libertarian and liberty-minded folks' culture, a guy named Joe Vogler, who's somebody from my neck of the woods up in here in Alaska, or at least his history would be written in my state. So yeah, we're going to get into that. A bunch of cool stuff. And we will jump into it. Looks like we got one of them back. Hector. Okay, well, Hector's back, but I don't know if he can hear me or not. So we'll wait for that to come back in. And Kareem is on his way back now as well. But yeah, we're going to be talking all about that today and some other awesome stuff. We got the boom branding up there. Sorry about that. And we'll jump into things, starting with the story of what's going on with DeSantis and the migrants. So, this is the story. And we got Kareem back. Kareem, can you hear us? All right, perfect. And Hector, I don't know if you can hear us yet. I don't think so. But
make a joke like you're going to take a ride with someone. I was going to say, hey, Hector can ride you to some places when he's governor, like you did.
Yeah. So I'll just kind of read through the story, and when Hector gets back, we can kind of bounce off of each other as our thoughts on it and the legal side. And we're going to probably do this whole thing again because this was kind of spur of the moment, I know. But DeSantis administration flies 2 planes of migrants to Martha's Vineyard, reports. Numerous Florida news outlets and national outlets reported Wednesday that Governor DeSantis, Ron DeSantis, sent 2 planes of immigrants out of the state to one he calls a sanctuary destination. This was Martha Vineyard. A report from News4Jax, Jacksonville, I believe this is where this news thing's partner, Local 10 News in Miami, quoted a statement from Terrelyn Finskay, the governor's communications director, who confirmed the planes landed in Martha Vineyard in Massachusetts. The statement reads, in part, I can confirm the 2 planes. Yeah, this is just a confirmation. So it is what it is. That's the story. 2 planes full of migrants were flown.
Yeah, I think it is
chaos, funny. Adam. Chaos is happening. It's your fault. I just got done with Adam's show, the Porcupine,
Yeah, what's he doing
with
here?
Jose Galison. It was really fun, coming right off of that show. So, yeah,
and
we're gonna get into the swing of it. Damn it, Adam, you threw me off, and I'm
Adam
still
didn't
more
invite
drunk
me.
than usual.
He's not a real libertarian, and he's not
Yeah.
good at fist fighting. Actually, I don't know. I'd like to see what Adam looks like boxing, because he's talked about MMA, and I started doing it. I will say I think this is funny, and it's kind of funny to see progressive like authoritarians lose their mind because they're all about like love is love and no humans illegal and bring everybody in, and how come you conservatives are so mean, and I don't even like conservatives, but still. And then 50 of them makes them like call the National Guard, call the police, call everybody. Oh, he wants to smash me? Oh, well, I don't swing that way.
Some
Jeez.
gay shit, Adam. I don't know.
Yeah.
Smash and Nutter in the same chat brick. I don't know.
Well, Adam likes me. Anyway, you're not my type, Adam. But here's what I would say is funny. Outside of this, though, I do agree with Max Henry that this is unconstitutional. You can't just use taxpayers' money to fly people to sanctuary cities and do all this stuff. I get it. I get why he did it, but still. So it's kind of funny on both. It exposes both the authoritarian left and the right. Shows that the authoritarian left is just virtue signaling constantly and they're full of crap.
Yeah.
And I don't think that should shock anybody because these are the people who literally said, my body, my choice, my body, my choice, or you got to take a medical procedure the establishment wants you to take, or, you're a bad person. So it doesn't shock me.
No, not a bit.
One thing I'll say, though, I'll say two things I think are interesting because I've been getting in tons of fights. And maybe I'll take your take on this, Leighton. To be honest, like as an ANCAP, I always thought that I'd be arguing with Democrats and Republicans. And to be fair, most disgruntled Democrats and Republicans agree with me, and the authoritarian ones just don't really have an argument against me. They just kind of run away, which I don't think would shock you. But I've been arguing with a lot of objectivists and minarchists and classical liberals on why I think that anarchy is not only a viable way to exist, but it's the best thing for society. One thing I'm trying to point out is a lot of people have been, like you're talking about the guy you really like as a voluntarist. And one person I really like that doesn't get mentioned, a lot of people know who he is Lysander Spooner. And he clearly said that these people aren't going to follow constitutional laws. They're not going to follow anything. I think I want to just bring the point that, hey, DeSantis isn't going to follow the Constitution either.
To play devil's advocate, what if the popular sentiment of that state is that illegal immigrants aren't welcome there, so the decision was largely approved? Yeah, we're going to get into all of that, I think, here in a minute. Hector's joining back. I do want to say on this topic, and I'll have to reiterate this because I think me and him probably have some disagreements we're going to talk about, as well as the legal angle. I think it's definitely being done for show. Speaking of which, hey, here's back. So I just read through this story real quick, which is the DeSantis administration flies 2 planes.
Sure.
This is the basic just overview of it. And I think what we'll discuss is kind of start with what your initial take on it was, and then what the kind of analytical angle of it is and opinion there.
Talking to me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my thought was, holy shit, what the fuck is this guy doing? That was my immediate reaction. I took to social media and I called for the guy's resignation immediately because I knew this was bad. It's possible for him to do what he's doing, and to do so legally, and it was going to get complicated and messy. And within about 4 or 5 days, everybody realized just how fucked up it really was.
Right.
And continues to be, actually.
I'll say this. I think from the legal angle, this is a shit show. And I've talked now to two separate people kind of behind the scenes in the kind of legal world that have said this is a shit show for a bunch of different reasons. What do you see as being the biggest red flags from that angle? I know you made a series of tweets, and we can bring those up if you want, but we can just go
Shit.
over it.
I this is the first time I'm actually cussing about this because I know it's Outlawed Thoughts, so I'm okay. But the reality is that the first thing I said was they picked all these people up from Texas, and then that's weird. And then my second thought was that Abbott doesn't want to say that he had any involvement with this. I'm like,
Right.
oh shit. That means that DeSantis did it all on his own with his people, and there's some sketchy characters that are involved. Whoever that are going off by nicknames. Apparently, they didn't even want to give them their real names.
Right. Yeah, I think the way that I see it is, me and you and I think probably differ slightly on certain topics in the immigration thing as a whole and that. But this in particular, I have seen a couple different takes on it, and it seems to me like it's just a legal shit show that he walked into trying to make a PR statement and doing a PR statement with a bunch of taxpayer money. That's like, and then starting from what I understand, he's basically created a whole arm with $13 million to continue to do this, which is a whole nother bag of problems. Like, because now he's just saying, well, I have intent to continue to do it. It's like, well, this is even worse. Like, I don't think the model of taking immigrants from one area or migrants from one area or refugees from one area to another is going to save anybody from anything. And I think my statement on Twitter, although used some language that I think I did, is not necessarily the best in a libertarian stance. I don't think that tweet was maybe geared towards libertarians as much as it was geared towards Republicans. I think that a lot of Republicans see what DeSantis is doing as a good thing. Like, oh, they're sending him to the liberals, and that's sticking it to him. But if the Republicans stopped and thought for a second, they'd go, well, wait a minute. Like, isn't the issue and what we've been talking about, and even Trump with his Republican take on it, was build the wall, stop immigrants from coming through, right? So the right needs to pick a lane. Either you don't want migrants coming in and you want to be pro-secession, anti-feds, because they're the ones that are letting people in because the feds are the ones that run the borders, or you need to be pro-migration, pro-immigration, open borders, or you can't really be one of two with that kind of ideology, at least the way I see it in the GOP especially. Like, it's just not possible. I don't see an avenue where they can kind of juggle both of those balls at the same time.
Preferably, if I'll make some controversial statements here. I think we should go with the Hans Herr approach, which is probably like a right-wing ANCAP, and say, look, immigration should just be done by invitation. So if Leighton wants to invite someone from the Dominican Republic.
This is going to be a much better conversation now, I think. This is going to be fun because I think we're going to have three differing opinions on this.
Just because I've had Republicans, and not even Republicans, but how would I classify them? People on the right, the nationalist right, is that a good way? They don't consider themselves people like Vox Day, Nick Fuentes, John Doyle, like the people who are kind of Trumpy, but they're not crazy about Israel, but they're kind of, am I painting a good picture of where they're at? Yeah. We've talked about this. And they said, I don't like libertarians because they're open borders. They said the previous ones, the Beltway boys, the Knicks are. But I said, look, I could be if we end the drug war, we have school choice, and we don't give subsidies out like candy, like this Koch brothers garbage. That being said, though, I'd probably say I don't want a wall because that violates eminent domain. And eminent domain, even if it's in this Constitution, to me is an ANCAP, is a property rights violation. So you have to do it Hans Hermann Hoppe's way, which is immigration should be done by invitation. Invite your wife over. Invite the people you want to work for you over. And you're responsible for what happens. And you take, if you want to call it legal responsibility. But
My
I think-
understanding of Hoppa's whole like the invitation thing, I've read a little bit about. I haven't read his work about. Like I've read synopsises of it and stuff. I have always been for more of like a private system, but I think that would also kind of fall into just because I'm ANCAP, like my
I mean, I think Hoppa isn't. I mean,
it's a
I've
great
seen him
shirt, by the way. Is that Top Lobster, right?
Yeah, it's top lobster.
Yeah.
Top Lobster.
He was just in the chat of the Adam stream I was on with Nutter.
Nutter likes this shirt too.
Yeah, I think the way that we like the way the Republicans and everybody else like react to immigration in general is one of two ways. Like you have the pro-wall Trump kind of immigration stances, and then you have the old school Republican immigration stances, which are more so on this like they just don't want to change anything. Like, and the same is true for a good deal of the Democratic Party. I feel like they just don't want to change anything. They'd just be fine with continuing the same bullshit. I think Hoppa's vision for kind of invitation works. I mean, the problem is, and every ANCAP would immediately say, like, who gets to make the invitations and who's creating the system around sending those out, and doesn't that get back to kind of creating either some kind of monarchy or government?
That's not. But the thing I have a problem with that is it's not like you're appointed. I'm not appointing like. I mean, granted, yeah, you could have someone if theoretically there's a state. Larry Sharp has suggested some good ideas on immigration too, and he's not a Mises guy, but I don't think it's not like Dave Smith or Ron Paul. Like it's not like someone is appointed and like you're the immigration thing. It comes down to you say, I have a business. I married someone from such and such country, and then you say, okay, I can invite them with these rules in these community. I think the community more polices that than you approved to some monarch or some. We don't want monarch.
I'd be perfectly fine with that system. I think that would be just as good as a private solution in my eyes. Like a private solution. It is a further private solution. Like me. Like that, I would say would be kind of more on the akin to like, if people want to allow people in and they want to put up, say, a job or put up some kind of financial backup, things like that, that goes a long way. I think too in changing minds, especially on the right side of politics, to go, hey, like, there's a system where we get hard workers, we get people who want to get things done. So we'll let Hector have the floor here and he can go into things. I want to read this chat from Magoo because this seems like it's going to be opposite to what we said. Cool. Facebook and Amazon just invited 10 million migrants to come to your state where they opened offices, factories, and we're right back to where we are now. I will push back on that just by saying that Amazon and Facebook and these companies are outsourcing cheaper than they would ever be able to get work in the US already, regardless of whether that system existed.
And they get government subsidies here. That like Amazon and Facebook and Google and all those things are like. We want to talk about welfare queens, big tech, big pharma, the military. Like those people, those quote unquote private thing, because I want to talk about Alex Jones and Steven Crowder if you want to, Leighton. So
yes, we could get into that too.
I'm gonna get on Alex Jones because if people like him, get rid of Alex Jones and go to David Icke. David Icke's better.
JC says it basically just means you're willing to vouch for someone and put some skin in the game. It should be done on the most local level today.
Yes.
I agree with that statement as a whole. And if that's what Hoppa's talking about when he talks about that, like I said, I haven't gone into it, obviously, but the way you guys have explained it, I'd be perfectly fine with that. And if that's a private solution, then it's in my wheelhouse. I'm fine with that.
Sure.
Well, so.
Yeah. And even, okay, Magoo, let's say they did invite 10 million people. The problem is not 10 million people if we have this, because I don't believe in the Bill Gates.
I think we can have a lot more people than people think.
Yeah, we can have a lot more people. I'm actually more I'm not on the Elon Musk or Bill Gates side. I say if the population goes up and down and it does its thing. That being said, I think we can definitely have more people. The 10 million thing doesn't scare me. The problem is with 10 million people, they're getting subsidized by the state. And Amazon and Facebook get these grants for diversity quotas and they pull 10 million people. So they do now, they don't say inherently, oh, I need to bring over these. They say we're all about love and diversity. And then they want to hire so many people. Oh, let's get so many Mexicans, so many Arabs, so many Jews, so many whatever in my state. But they're not really interested in like trying to overall help people from those countries, in my opinion. They're trying to hit diversity quotas. So as long as you have the state incentivizing bad behavior, yeah, Amazon and Facebook, who are wings of the state, because they basically get all their kickbacks and subsidies from there, are going to do stuff like that. I think it would be radically different if you had a free market. Granted, I don't know for sure, but can't have them versus wanting them are two very different things. I would agree. Yeah, they are.
But they both have incentives and disincentives, both of those options for a company and for a private citizen. Like, I think ultimately, like, for instance, I have back in the day, like if we go back 50, 60 years, I would have had family that were coming over from areas like Europe and places like that. If somebody who is already here had to say, hey, I'm going to stake claim and say, like, I own a business and this person's going to get hired here, or I have an apartment complex, so this person's going to be doing this and they'll have this as a responsibility. Like there's some reasoning or concern to be coming to the country other than just, I think the American dream aspect, right, is the important part in the sense, like being able to come to a country where maybe you are coming from a country where you don't have a lot of opportunity, you don't have financial well-being, you're in a shitty situation, so you're trying to come to America to make money.
Those shithole countries, right?
Right, but the invitation method, the way that you guys have explained it, makes that work still, because one of those people that are coming in who have less opportunity in the place they're coming will have better incentive to look for a person willing to vouch for them in this country that maybe doesn't pay the traditional job market value of somebody who's already established for 5, 10, 20 years as a, or 2, 3, 4 generations, right, in the country. So the market's self-correcting in that way to me. At least the job market, like, because that's the complaint you'll hear a bunch of Republicans goes, oh, they're coming to take my jobs. It's like, well, that kind of solves that problem, because like the people coming in are going to be people who are either for specialty work that they're really smart and that's why they're being chosen, or they're for jobs that they maybe need a leg up and they need to save and get some work experience. So they're looking for something that's a little less competitive for people who are already living here. There doesn't seem to be much middle area, which I think is good.
No, and I think we should invite people who are particularly good at AI so we can compete with the free market.
I think that's a great point. Like getting more people technologically.
Because China is going to have more advanced, and I'll be honest, if China has more advanced AI than we do, that's a problem. And I think to stay competitive in the AI market, we should have it facilitated to the private sector, not the pentagram. But
all right, Hector, you have the floor. Yeah, take it away.
All right, let's go to theoretical. Hoppe, at the end of the day, all of his theories come back to the idea of competing jurisdictions of sovereignty, right? So that's where the freedom is in the competition, so that no one can have a claim, a total claim on your life and liberty, because you can just get the fuck out, right? So the what it comes down to is immigration. Actually, what Hoppe's theory in terms of what we were just talking about is a good half measure for what we have today, right? Just this idea either of sponsoring somebody, but this week has really shown me that the federal government in the federal immigration system is just so broken that a DeSantis could just step in and just do whatever he wants, even in another state, and the mealy mouths are like, no, you should. Nobody in the federal government, like I said, he can't do that. Nobody in Texas has said no, he can't do that. And frankly, no Democrat in Florida has said no, he can't do that. I'm the only one in the state of Florida, and libertarians with me. are the only ones that said really he can't do that. He
So
can't
let's,
operate outside of his
on
where he
that
was
note,
elected to represent. Right.
is there a specific legal facet that you see as being like actionable on any way? Like, is there something that can be done about what he's done, or is it more of a from a moralistic point of view? And that's
No, there's
something I
actual there is legal. I mean, the idea that jurisdictional sovereignty or territorial jurisdiction is the idea that a government is basically what are borders, right? I
right,
feel like I'm talking either this is like Judge Knapp would be saying like border. The borders are simply the limit to where a government's authority goes to and stops, right? So DeSantis has gone beyond those borders and attempted to establish authority in Texas, right? Now that is that part that I just described to you is a Texas problem. The issue that he actually is using our tax dollars in Florida to do it is now is a violation of his actual authority from based on the Florida and the U.S. Constitution. So
okay,
just very simply put, he's elected to represent interests within the territorial boundaries of the state of Florida. I call bullshit on his action because we're in an economic recession. Florida particularly has some severe economic issues, and he's doing that right rather than taking care of issues. But I will tell you one thing: the greatest thing I've learned from this journey of it's only been like 5 days isn't how remarkably stupid DeSantis people are, and him to just go along with it, but really how beautiful our federalism system is in the United States, the American federalism system is, right? That we actually, even though there are 50 sovereign countries, and historically, all those 50 sovereign countries, the whole idea, if you are a sovereign, you will have the number one, and I'm getting goosebumps when I'm reading Antonin Scalia saying this, is rest in peace. The number one issue that defines a sovereign territory is the ability to tell someone to get the fuck out.
right, yeah, no, so I guess the way that I've stated it before is that if we are, I see the left in the media like CNN and CNBC has been running stories saying that it's human trafficking. I don't, I think that's almost
Could
in a
be.
way, well, I've looked into the legal side of that and I don't see it, and I think they're using it as a way of kind of hiding what might actually be the big problem legally, which is like, how do you pay for this? Like, I don't see how you can justify paying what he has to have been paying for these flights legally with any kind of budget or fund in Florida. Like, so there has to be some kind of angle there. I don't know if
Okay, no, I can
the
explain that. So they the legislature authorized a fund of $12 million and change. They eventually hired a contractor under that budget authorization. That the By the way, the budget authorization literally spells out explicitly this program is to send immigrants who or unauthorized aliens, whatever the fuck that means, uh, out of Florida. Like get them out of Florida, not to
that
go to
seems
Texas and go
unconstitutional.
somewhere else, right? Because even the legislature knows that they cannot program budget expenses outside of their jurisdiction.
Right.
All right. So, but the point is that like, how did this get? So they hired a contractor. The contractor went over. Obviously at some point they pulled the trigger and said we can't do this in Florida because we can't find enough people who will take us up on an offer. Why we don't have enough desperate immigrants basically in Florida. Oh, but Texas, there's plenty of desperate immigrants waiting over there who are stuck in basically immigration centers waiting for their turn to be their asylum application to be processed. Right? I mean the backlog there is maybe even a year, right? So
Yeah, I want to be clear real quick. The reason that I said looking into things legally on the like trafficking angle that the media went with was kind of bunk is for that exact reason, because it appears that it was voluntary in a sense. And so there isn't a way that I can see legally in a court they'd be able to peg on anything to do with trafficking, because that has to involve some form of force or coercion, and I don't know if they can actually get to that. But on the financial fraud thing, well, right, okay.
No, that's what they're saying. They're basing the idea that they induced cooperation or a voluntary action through
Okay.
fraud. So
No,
anybody
I
who's
could see that.
that's a very simple tort violation. That's just by definition fraud. A tortious fraud. So in other words, hey guys, I want, and this is really what they're saying happened. They're all in a detention center in the middle of nowhere, but outside, like 10, 20, I don't know.
Yeah,
Basically, they're saying it would take. Wait, no, but not just Texas. We're talking about Bufu, West Texas, desert. If you step out of this area, you are not going to see a living person alive for
see
for
some snakes,
a day,
but no people.
Right? You basically, the only way out of there is to buy a $50 bus ticket per person, and these were families, right? And so they're basically the closest city they had was San Antonio. And if you know Texas, it's already huge, and San Antonio is basically the biggest city to the west, in that direction of Texas. So this contractor not only simply promised them stuff, they gave them stuff ahead of time to induce cooperation. They got them cleaned up. They put them in hotel rooms. They gave them clothes. They gave them food. They gave them cell phones. I'm sure they gave them cash too. And then and some people still declined. No, I changed my mind. I'm not going to go. And other people did go anyway. With the idea that we're gonna go to you guys are going to Boston. There's going to be jobs, and you guys are going to have cash assistance, and literally, and they're all communicating all this stuff to people who don't speak any English whatsoever, right? Because the people who have to go through Mexico are the hardiest people, but they're also the least educated kind of people. Because if you had some money, you'd hop on a plane and go straight to
right. Yeah, it's a different situation.
I guess I want to make a statement on all of this. Okay, I can understand the federalism angle, and he definitely did violate the law. And if Congress does do something, then yeah, they definitely should go after him. All this being said, this, whether Republican, I did chuckle at it. There is, okay, fine. But it's to me like a PR stunt. But I think there's a bigger question to actually answer if you look at this as a big picture, is why are these migrants coming over? To me, it's, if you go back to Smedley Butler's thing, it's because of our intervention, particularly Dole Fruit Company, and a lot of U.S. intervention in places like Haiti, the Dominican Republic, places in Mexico, and things like that, creating cartels and incentivizing a lot of these groups. Now, the controversial point I want to make, since Leighton's talking about a guy who's not known in voluntarist circles, I bring this guy up all the time, probably way too much, is Dr. Leeson. And he pointed out an organization called the Fund for Peace and Foreign Policy. What he documents is that most governments, like the United States is in a relatively okay situation. Scandinavian countries are good. But outside of there, most governments are either classified as weak or failed, or I think they call it fragile. So the state can barely do anything, or it's almost not able to do anything.
Right.
And while it wouldn't be a Disney Wonderland, no pun intended, since we're talking about Florida, someone needs to tell the migrants from Haiti, Dominican Republic, Mexico, and those other places, look, it won't be fun if you go back. The best thing you can do, since you don't want to keep fleeing, is you need to figure out how to decentralize your government, and then things will work better. Just like Somalia got their murder rate down to what it was similar to around Mexico, you guys can probably get an even better, you could probably make some of your cities safer than Chicago, which is not saying very much, but it is saying that it can be a lot better if
better than it is now.
Someone needs to sit these migrants down and tell them, look, if you want to stop, I understand you're fleeing, but if you want a better life for you, children and everything, and you want to stop running around, it's a good idea to overthrow your government, and then things will socially improve. And I can be very confident of that because of the Fund for Peace and Foreign Policy, that the state there is either engaging in expropriation and predatory activities, or it's barely able to do anything. So get rid of it and see how self-governance can work in your sphere of existence.
JC
Sorry if that's a
says-
crazy take, but that's what came to my mind is like, can someone tell these governments to, or at least migrants, please go home and overthrow your government? And I get it. I'm the crazy anarchist, but it needs to be said. I think it does. Or maybe I'm just nuts.
Well, I think there's a point to be made that, like, people who do come over and get established, like, yeah, it is a good idea if you have any, if it's culturally, you have a cultural connection to your homeland, then it's a good idea if you come here and become financially stable to go back and help your homeland and make it a more strong anti-government decentralized place so that your ancestors can actually, you know, have a space in the place that you saw as home. I'm saying that from a point of view of somebody who's, you know, I was born here, you know, so it's like my family all immigrated, but they immigrated a long fucking time ago, in the, you know, 20s to the 40s.
So you're
But
like
I mean-
a fourth generation then.
Yeah.
We are all like, it's funny because my grandmother was adopted, so I didn't really know a ton of that side of the family until just recently, because she did like the 23andMe style stuff and found like all her biological family, because she was adopted, and so she had no idea like a lot about her biological family. But yeah, I have a bunch of like European, Polish area and like that kind of spot, and some ethnic areas in the Middle East, and then most everything else is all from Europe. So it's a lot of European Jews by the time they got here. Is the way that I would explain it. Most of them, anyway, to an extent. But yeah, is the familiar connections to other countries are always weird, you know. But yeah, so JC says it's all World Economic Forum type agenda, including some so-called NGOs, which are just globalist Trojan horses that can operate under the radar across all borders. They're the ones advertising lucrative jobs in the U.S., welfare benefits, etc., and sometimes even shuttling them up north. Sorry, I'm a little bit tipsy, guys. Those caravans don't organize themselves. And then he says, mass migration is also a global trafficking range dream. Yeah, so there's the thing, right? The government incentivizes all of those things right now. In the current immigration system we have, the government is incentivizing mass migration towards the border all at once in a seasonal diagram. And you have to break that up to be able to make this stable in any manner, like in any system we want to talk about. Like, there is no world in which we can have the open border system that people kind of envision in their utopia, where you can just walk up to the border and walk across. And right now, the government system, I think, is exactly kind of that in a way, where they're going to flood the gates, wait there, and then let them all in at once, which is almost even more disrupting than if it was just an open border. Like it, because there's no like all you can do is predict waves because of the weather cycles and shit. Like, it's the way that they're predicting this crap.
It's climate change, man.
Well, I mean, they don't have much of a choice, because they, like, the way the system's working right now is there'll be 4,000 people there, and then 5,000, and then 6,000, and then they're just letting them all in through once, cycling them, and then they say, well, we're going to track them, but that doesn't really work. Like, you're never, like, there's no government bureaucracy that can handle that. So you end up with this situation where it's almost worse than if we just had a slow intake open border system.
It's adding the scare. Listen. There's scarcity here. Let's look at the scarcity model. Let's treat this like if it's access to the United States is being restricted not simply by policy, but by basically a frustrating such process that of letting people in. Right? There's a lot of restrictions, or that aren't maybe are intentional. Who knows? But basically, the waiting list itself, the difficulty of getting permission to come. And for some people, if you have money, it's just easy to come. Actually,
Right.
it's when you don't.
I know that because I have people I know personally who were in their like 40s when I was younger, 15, 16, who were Cuban and from the Dominican Republic and random places across Mexico and random spots. And they all had relative money and never had a problem going back and forth.
I'm in Miami. Literally, they talk about chain migration being an issue, but it's the oldest story in the book is just buy a ring for somebody and you buy papers. That's the easiest.
You open the
that's
front
easiest
door.
way to do it. That's
right,
it.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
well, it kind of works that way in every country, by the way. It's not like we're the only ones. Like, if you want to immigrate to Japan, go marry a Japanese woman in Japan and immigrate to Japan. Like,
right. Oh, yeah, that's true too. And I've seen people who have had that same issue with the Scandinavian countries. They're actually very restrictive in
they're restrictive as shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't want no one.
I want to point out something, and Kareem mentioned about the Banana Republic or the Dole Fruit Company, basically that you have some of these countries in Central America that are just so they're so controlled by the big corporations that they're, however they're run is basically at the behest of the corporate interests there. So the stability and stability
to go along with this.
Look at that. I'll read it out. Corporations get to double dip by profiting of war and neo-imperialism, which is Dole Fruit, and then recruit refugees into red states to flip them blue and hire them and use their illegal status as bargaining leverage.
I'd agree with that entire statement. I mean, that is kind of my dad, we just had a conversation yesterday. Now he's late 50s. I would argue he is pro-migration for the majority of his life. But he looks at the media, looks at everything. He goes, listen, it's not the immigrants' fault. He goes, it's the fault of the businesses. My dad goes, if you walk in, why are they punishing people across the border? They should be punishing the people who are hiring 200, 400, 500 known illegals and giving them the jobs over them. Now, that's not my position, but that's what he said. He's like, well, they're giving jobs over Americans. That's what pisses off Americans. It's not the fucking migrants' fault that they're getting that job over somebody else. It's the fault of the business for literally paying for it to happen because they can get cheaper labor with an incentive because they can trap that labor by saying, well, we have information we can turn over to the government that'll get you fucking screwed in the long run.
Right. That's what I want to mention, right? That's what I want to add to what Kareem was saying earlier. It's so you have the situation externally with either the war on drugs, the instability caused by corporatism abroad, or either the Dole Fruit Company's Banana Republic. But then internally, what do we have here, right? We have controls, price controls in the labor market domestically that now create an artificial scarcity in the labor market for cheap labor. That what are we talking about? We're talking about that there's basically discrimination against younger people, they're older people as well, and then ultimately, and of course, if you are a product of the school to prison pipeline and you're black, you're basically not getting a job unless you figure out a way to to make a living and not get caught selling drugs. Get into professional sports or get a scholarship, right?
Right.
I mean, I work the inner city. I mean, that's just reality. So that in a sense is really what is causing a lot of. And when they ask you why can't I get a job, then the term is it's the illegal alien that took the job, but really it's the expectation that these elevated or manipulated pricing or that you should expect for your labor is a realistic expectation when it's not, right? It's not founded on anything real. It's not founded on any on actually the price mechanism in the market. So people are led to a huge disappointment, and they're told, take it out on the immigrant, not on the politician.
So, you know what? Honestly, take it out. If I can't get a job, the one thing I blame is the Federal Reserve. Like, there's an economic problem. People like this, the immigrant, that guy. I'm like, dude, it's the Federal Reserve. This is your like without the Federal Reserve, we'd be ridiculous. You probably buy a house for like a nice house for like I looked at prices and probably like 5-6 grand, like literally, like we'd be ridiculously well off with jobs and everything, and that's one thing I would say. But JC made a good point. Corporations double diff by starting wars or profiting off of war, and then recruit the refugees in the red states, flip them blue, hire them, and use the illegal status. And that's kind of what I see. They destabilize countries. Then they say, oh my God, you got to help these people. The country's destabilized. I'm like, oh, who did that? Oh, it couldn't have been the military-industrial complex trying to make a couple of bucks.
Right.
And I work. Funny enough, I'm not going to say much about my work, but because I work with people from Poland, and they tell me there's Ukrainian refugees everywhere. I'm not going to get into Ukraine and Russia. Obviously, I have my own opinions about that, which I've talked a lot about, but it's not really pertinent now. It's kind of funny.
That's okay. That's okay. You have your rights.
Yeah. Uh-huh. I can't get along with objectivists and minarchists. They're sitting next to me like I said, Happy Constitution Day with a Lysander Spooner with red eyes, and they're like, come on, man, the Constitution still works. I'm like, nobody reads it. Nobody cares. And if they do, they don't care what it says. Like the CIA.
The Constitution is a beautifully written, very intelligent document that means absolutely fucking nothing.
Yes.
I mean, that's that. But I'm like, if you had asked me that 3 years ago, I would have given you a completely different answer. But it doesn't.
Right.
Like I don't see a mechanism where it can work now.
It's not the Constitution works because of what's not written in it. Right. It works because of federalism. And my God, I'm telling you, when we talk about like we have to reverse the entire progressive era, immigration. The entire immigration national bureaucracy that enables a national immigration policy, the entire bureaucracy was created only to take away the management of immigration and entry from the states and give it to the feds. That's it. That was it.
Yeah, let's read. I'll read this.
Here's my solution to
the average person doesn't understand the Fed's role or the unseen economic policies. They just see the migrant taking their job, the lower wages, and so the angst is understandable, even as misguided. Yeah, and that's how I felt with people who, even the Trumpian types who are like, build the wall. I'm like, you need to redirect your energy, but I get it. Like, I understand why you're looking for a solution, and that's a good thing. You're just putting that energy in the wrong place.
Exactly.
I think the average populist isn't racist, just concerned about economic survival, especially in a recession like this one. Yeah, and I agree with that statement too.
I think the average populist is focused on trying to get solutions still from a central institution, and that's the problem. That's the issue. The Constitution can work if you take it to your city council and most people in your town agree with it.
Yeah.
Most people then it can work. But it doesn't work when you have highly centralized. It doesn't work when you get highly centralized institutions, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
This is why, like, if we're talking, Stefan Molyneux and other people got in real big fucking trouble because they talked about the fact that whether you want immigration into the country, you might be thinking about immigration different in your community, right? Like, maybe you want to live in a community that's predominantly one race or one ethnicity or one group that came from one specific area. And if you can economically feasibly do that, I don't have any fucking problem in the world with it. I think that's part of what makes me an ANCAP, because the Democrats and Republicans both have a problem with that. Like, they have a problem with Chinatowns. They have a problem with Spanish people wanting to live in predominantly Spanish neighborhoods. And they also have a problem with white people wanting to live in white neighborhoods. The whole way around. They want to have control over the whole population. And they recognize that that's a hell of a lot harder to do when people are in an area where they're all ethnically on the same board, politically on the same board, however you want to word it. But those kind of things are just there. They're present. Like the government views that as a very specific thing they have to attack constantly.
Yeah, I would argue they actually incentivize that behavior, because if you give people subsidies and you don't force them to kind of assimilate, then you do get a lot of Chinatowns and things.
So,
like that.
for instance, the government hates people gentrifying neighborhoods, and they've turned certain people against that idea in total. When in all actuality, if you break down the idea of gentrification, you're like, well, okay, let's say I have an area that is predominantly low income, and it could be predominantly white, predominantly black. It doesn't really matter. It could be any ethnic background. It just has to be predominantly low income, maybe has a middling crime rate, it has a lot of burglaries, things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have a bunch of businesses of wealthier people who are an opposite ethnic background who want to move into that area and open businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they are gentrifying that area, and from an ethnic position, you can have a problem with it. But from a political position and a market position, that's only a good thing, because it's going to bring higher dollar businesses, higher paying jobs, better housing, and the argument by the government in coalition with the left at this point is it squanders art and it takes away the culture. And it's like bullshit. Like, no one fucking believes that in the real world, because I can go to neighborhoods here in Alaska that are higher income. There's plenty of culture. There's plenty of art. There's plenty of, it's like
Leighton. So no, the theory is for that is about social fabric. That's what they call it.
Right.
So in other words, the traditions that are over a long period of time for civic participation and social, let's just say, voluntaristic, co-living with people, with a community that knows one another, and that can come together for solutions without relying on politicians. That is why they constantly want to see those communities disrupted, because they naturally don't need the politicians.
Well, and I think we saw that, right? We saw this, I think, the breakup of those communities big time through 2016, and nobody fucking noticed it. No one paid attention because it was Trump versus the Democrats, and that's what everyone was paying attention to. I'm like, yeah, but all the pro-Trump neighborhoods and all the pro-Democrat neighborhoods and shit, like, went into these weird positions where the inner governments in those areas got real shooken up, and it ended up being horrible for some of these places where you have like predominantly left areas that are being led by the most left of the neighborhood that are putting the places in just complete and utter disrepair. Or you see the reverse, right? Where you see some military rightist who wants to like spend all this money on the police station in an area, but nothing on civil infrastructure and keeping the roads cleared and people like, shit like that. And so it's bad on both of those scales, And I think it's all getting worse, like in a way. But in the communities, in some areas, I think it's repairing itself, because I think the people in the communities are waking up. And I think like Maj Touré and people like that do great work in that area, where I see a lot more kind of a white pill function to it, where, okay, if the government is fucking over these people and we recognize the government's fucking these people over, maybe all we need to do is explain it to them and get them on the same page. And if they can turn that angst that they might have against the way they've been treated through that process against the government, then we're on the same page, and it's a good thing in the long run. Also, because they're going to do the same thing, right? Every immigrant who comes into this country is going to try to get picked up by the left and right. They want to vote. That's what they're after.
Here's one question I have that I find particularly weird. And this is actually about conservatives. For a long time, conservatives complained about immigrants and stuff like that. And particularly, I've had a lot of conservatives actually complain about, Islam and stuff like that. Like, oh, we got to go over there. Still, there's some people like, oh, we got to fight in Yemen and stuff. I'm like, what is wrong with you at this point? But or there's people like Mark Levin on Fox News, not a liberal, who will say, okay, we gotta just, which drives me nuts because we gotta give Ukraine $100 million every 10 seconds or something to fight. But to me, the two countries that will not do the things that conservatives are annoyed with now, which is drag queen shows and all this crazy, like, just pushing like hypersexualized stuff. I've joked. I've said, like, hey guys, if you don't want all this stuff, the best place you can go is Dearborn, Michigan, in a Muslim community. There won't be any drag shows there. I guarantee it. And it's also ironic they want to fight Russia, which, in Russian communities, I don't see that they're going to put up with anything like that at all. At all. So a lot of the people who want like conservative and actually, appealing to those people who want communities where we're saying, okay, no big government, F the feds, stay away, all that stuff. Some of the best communities for that would be those two communities. So I don't think they should be against like, hey, we want to have Chinatown. We want to have Islami town. Islamaville next to Jewville with Jewtopia run by Leighton after he's done being ambassador to.
They don't want me to be in charge, man. I think I'm at this point. If I walk into a synagogue, I'm still Jewish, but I might burst into flames.
What would you do if Dave? What if Dave wins and then he does call you up and says, "Hey, Leighton, I know you're looking for a job. You're ambassador to Israel now." Would you say, "Yeah"? Would you do it?
I'm gonna have a lot of Palestinian friends. Put it that way. All right. Well, I think this is a good kind of position to move into some other topics and stuff. It's like a solid hour just on that. I think we did fucking great.
Yeah. Can I start ripping all out? Can I start tearing out
King Leighton the First, Frozen.
Hey, by the way, if I haven't said in the program, but I am actually suing Ron DeSantis to try and get him to stop the bullshit. Like I said, that's illegal.
Yeah. So I'm gonna keep. I want to have you back on too to break down that, especially like because once it's like publicly filed and all that stuff, you should have like the
paperwork. Well, it's on the docket now. It was today.
Is it really?
I filed it today. Yeah.
Oh shit. Okay. So I'm gonna do. We're gonna we'll have you back on and we're gonna have like a whole breakdown. We'll go over things and it'll be cool. And maybe
we'll find out. We'll get some more information. Shit. Yeah.
And we'll get some more. We'll get some more Florida people on at the same time. Josh was tuckered out tonight. He passed out. But we'll try to get like Josh and Tim or something on for that stream.
I need to sue politicians here in Pennsylvania. And then I need to
it's crazy.
Presidents.
I was so surprised how easy it was.
Yeah. Okay, so
can I sue Obama over Syria and Yemen and Trump and Biden? I'll lay Taylor out.
You can't bring these people before the Hague. You know that, even in absentia. That's why Donald Rumsfeld could never leave the United States. Ever. Mm-hmm. He never could. He was actually convicted of war crimes abroad.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, you think the international community does have like its own standards, right? Whether it's not American standards, but it is a form of justice. And yes, I think we should sue Adam Nutter.
Adam Nutter. He's a bitch.
It's Nutter v. Radner. Radner v. Nutter.
Speaking of which, you guys are both coming to Florida in
October? I'll be at Florida Freedom Fest. I'm actually bringing family with me too. I'm bringing my dad and my brother. It sounds like too.
Watch out! I think I heard we still have a room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, show me the details for that, Leighton. I'll see if I can make it.
I will send you information. Yeah, absolutely. So
David Nutter will be there. I do know that. He is confirmed.
I want to cover this on its own kind of episode, so I'm maybe hoping Kareem and other people can come back tomorrow and we can do a longer stream on this one topic that I'm going to cover, but we'll kind of do a introduction to it right now, and then I'm going to be covering it a little bit more later. But this guy right here, this dude's name is Joe Vogler. He was a figure here in the state of Alaska. He founded a thing called the Alaska Independence Party. And I'm going to go through his Wikipedia here and read it off. It's really bland. And then I'm going to tell a little bit of his story and kind of what I like him for. Joseph E. Vogler, April 24th, born 1913, passed away May 31st, 1993, who was the founder of the Alaska Independence Party. He was also chair or gubernatorial nominee during most of the party's existence. He's also known originally in his adopted hometown of Fairbanks, Alaska, and later statewide as a frequent participant in governmental and political affairs and frequent litigant in court. Curiously enough, he was known to many non-political observers for his fashion sense, in particular his wearing of fedoras and bolo ties. Vogler was born April 24th, 1913, on a farm outside Barnes, Kansas. He graduated from high school in Waterville, Kansas in 1929. That year, he began studying at University of Kansas on a scholarship. He graduated with a law degree in 5 years and admitted to the Kansas State Bar. Vogler moved to Alaska in March 1942, having run afoul of many of his contemporaries in the lower 48 regarding his views on then U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt. After spending a year in Kodiak, he moved to Fairbanks and worked as a civilian employee of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers at Ladd Field, which is a place here. Now Fort Rainworth, it's still in operation, in Fairbanks, until 1951. He began mining until 1951, when he began mining a homestake creek. He filed for 80 acres of homestead land off the Steese Highway and acquired 320 acres near Fairbanks off Farms Fairview Loop Road. Vogler spent 50 years as a miner and developer in Alaska. Vogler was known around Fairbanks as a frequent writer of letters to the editor until 1973, when he launched a petition drive calling for Alaska to secede. He
Nice.
launched his first campaign for governor a year later. He gained his first serious notoriety in Fairbanks during the 1940 and 1950 feud with Paul and Fiera Greiman, operators of university bus lines. The company was a private urban transit company which primarily transported students between Fairbanks and the University of Alaska. Prior to one of the replacement of the Cushman Street Bridge in 1959, the old bridge was narrow to accommodate both a large vehicle, such as a truck or bus, and another vehicle. Vogler, with Warren A. Taylor as his attorney, sued University Bus Lines in 1948. In that Fairbanks, Alaska Daily News, okay, I'm going to skip over this. Political career. Vogler arose as a figure in Alaska politics in 1973 when he began a petition calling for secession of Alaska from the United States. Alaska Magazine reported that Vogler claimed to have gathered 15,000 signatures over a period of about 3 weeks. Vogler was quoted as saying about the effort, "The response has been beyond my wildest expectations. I never dreamed the people would respond like this." During the 1970s, Vogler founded the Alaska Independence Party, AIP, and Alaskans for Independence. The latter name was originally used to label the 1973 petition drive. Vogler, who claimed to have organized the meeting which led to the formation of the Alaska Libertarian Party, AIP and AFI, as Vogler explained, were intended to function as strictly separate entities. AIP was primarily to explore whether the 1958 vote by Alaskans authorizing statehood was legal, and AFI was primarily to actively pursue secession for Alaska from the United States. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this before we get into his disappearance and the history here.
Why did he want Alaska to secede? Did he say why?
We can get into that here too as well. I'm just was reading that story that Hector sent me there. So basically, Vogler believed that Alaska should secede for a number of reasons, primarily the fact that it was his view that Alaska got a raw deal compared to other people that were admitted into the Union. When other territories got admitted in the Union or other areas got absorbed that were foreign areas, meaning areas like Alaska and stuff, they got a option. Their option was to not be a part of the Union, to be a part of the Union, to be independent of the Union and have open trade, or to secede. When we were given the option, we were only given two, which was remain a territory or become a part of the Union. And he believed that that gave legal authority for the secession of the state. A lot of historians legally agree with him, and a lot of lawyers still to this day agreed with him on a number of reasons. I want to read this one story here, which is from the Alaska Watchman, which has a bit of a history, and so I don't want to screw to everything they have to say, but they are a platform for media and news in the state, and they write about specific things here. So I'm going to
Any of them want to join Russia?
Probably. Denied options at statehood continue to haunt Alaska.
That's defeating the purpose, though.
In 1980, a referendum was placed before Alaskan voters. So the Alaska Statehood Commission be convened to study the status of the people of Alaska within the United States and to consider and recommend appropriate changes in the relationships of the people of Alaska to the United States. It passed by a 1% margin, 46,000 to 45,000. This was a culmination of decades of frustration since Alaska was even an organizational territory in 1912. This indicates the Bellinger-Pinchot affair. The Jones Act, fish traps, the unconstitutional provisions written into our state constitution as a condition of statehood, and even at the need of act of Congress to develop Prudhoe Bay. And finally, the outrageous and unconstitutional Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act, or ANILCA, done by executive order through President Jimmy Carter, our favorite person, I'm sure. He utilized the already questionable Antiquities Act of 1906, a federal act indeed to be used moderately by the president to preserve, without annoying Congress, small areas of cultural or historical significance. Allow that to sink in. Guamians, Filipinos, and Puerto Ricans have more rights than Alaskans or Hawaiians in the state of Alaska or Hawaii. Through ANILCA, Alaska promises of statehood and the 90 to 10% avenue split from the development of federal properties. So basically what this meant is that the feds just took over all the land from the state. A timetable was set in which all of the NGSTs or NSGTs were to be offered four options: continue as a territory or colony, 2, Commonwealth status, 3, amalgamation of the mother country, statehood and American understanding, or 4, independence. The Philippines opted for independence, with the defense treaty recognizing its own vulnerabilities in ways that might certainly suit Alaska. Filipinos requested that they were permitted to join the American forces, armed forces, such as an arrangement enabled as now independent Filipino citizens to keep a specially crafted relationship with the U.S. Guam opted for continued territorial status, Puerto Rico for Commonwealth. Commonwealth generally means independence with a free trade agreement and the guarantee that the status could change to total independence or even statehood in the future. But Alaska and Hawaii were only offered two options: continue as a territory or statehood. Allow that to sink in. Guamians, Filipinos, and Puerto Ricans have more rights than Alaskans or Hawaiians. Mm-hmm. And with that, the federal government did not fulfill its obligation to Alaska as per 1945 UN Charter 2, which is a technical version of it. Our Statehood Act and state constitution demand that we also forever disavow claims to federal property in Alaska, despite the fact that Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 in the 10th Amendment, literal federal property to D.C., 63 square miles. Forts, arsenals, magazine warehouses, dockyards, and other needful buildings. You can look it up. There have been no offered amendments to fix or properly constitutionalize national parks, forest, wildlife refuge, monuments, cemeteries, historic sites, or battlefields. So I'm going to skip to Joe Vogler's.
What's the percentage of federal ownership of land or control of land in Alaska?
Oh, you want to hear the kicker there? Private ownership in the state of Alaska is less than 0.5%.
So it's even worse than Nevada. Got it.
Oh, it's the worst in any state. We're the worst in America. The majority of this country, of this state, is owned by the feds, and then a portion's owned by the state. And that was Vogler's point back then, was what the fuck are we doing? So Vogler corresponded with the Iranian embassy at the UN, which was eager to embarrass the United States as he was, willing to give him a platform for Alaska's and, by association, Hawaii's case before the world. With a governor of considerable reputation, popularity, and experience of his own choosing in place, Vogler seemed on the cusp of a major breakthrough and told his friends about it. Then he mysteriously disappeared a week before leaving for New York. Alaskan law enforcement was suddenly indifferent to his disappearance for days, passing off his absence as the peccadilloes of an eccentric old man, which his friends knew was not in his intelligent and vigorous nature. When his home was finally cordoned off as a crime scene, forensic work by his friends had already determined that his guard dogs had been drugged. For a full year, Fairbanks and the entire state took up his cause. Where is Joe? When the body was discovered in a shallow grave outside of Fairbanks 15 months later, a convenient scapegoat, already with a pile of felonies, ready to convict him, confessed. This made the need of a trial, which might expose the inconsistencies of a contrived confession, unnecessary. Alaska's twilight zone of a warped, incomplete statehood, the federal government's reputation of broken treaties and promises, and Alaska's collective sense that something has not been quite right all along since 1959 were not buried permanently in Joe Vogler's shallow grave. So, I'm going to go more into the story behind how his death came and the inconsistencies behind it and some of that stuff in a longer episode. But I will leave us with something before we kind of move on to last stories and all that stuff before we end things out, which is we should listen to the guy for a second, because that seems like something that should happen. So I have here some recordings.
I'd like to know this. I'd like to know the story of how you found this guy.
So
yeah.
So Joe's story came kind of my way because I was looking into kind of old libertarian movements when the party was founded and stuff. And he had always claimed to be the founder. There's some story there as to who really founded it, but he was one of the people who helped start the party for libertarians here in the state.
Well, if you're going to say that, let's say context. Alaska was the first state to elect a libertarian, a member of the Libertarian Party, to a state legislature.
Right. And I would argue that maybe other than New Hampshire, it is the most popular third party by like populace. Not by the numbers, obviously, because we don't have the population, but like per capita. Joe with the Independence Party was the first guy to really put forward the idea that, hey, we should like completely leave. Like the state doesn't have our best interests. We're separated by a fucking country anyway. Like we need to figure out our own thing. And his main concern was that he came from the mining areas, and operated a mine himself. Matter of fact, and his estate was over 60 ounces of gold after he passed away, just on him. But
did he read?
He read a lot, but at his time, I'm not sure what would have been out because
Lysander Spooner.
Spooner, I'm sure. I'm sure with the stuff that he's writing, talked about, I can't see him not having read Spooner. So this is a recording of his voice during an interview. This is an interview he did in Alaska. There's not much camera footage of him. They did a documentary on him. He had a standoff with the National Park Service because he used a cat to get to his mine, and he took him all the way to the Supreme Court for this because they stopped him for trying to use a cat to get to the mine.
You mean a tracked vehicle?
Yeah, they landed in a helicopter on his head, and try and shut it down. And they made a whole documentary in Alaska about that, which was the first thing I actually saw about him.
Why did the feds want him gone? Because he was trying to secede, or because he worked with Iran?
Dude, he got permission to give an hour-long speech to the fucking UN. Like, I don't think people realize how insane that is. But, like, a random politician from Alaska got Iran to be like, yeah, we'll give you an hour spot. Like, that is not something that happens. Like, not unless you're picked by hand. And it was only because the Iranians were in a position where
we're going to hear?
No, this is him talking. Yes.
But does that make him a actual, like, granted, I like his ideas, but did they perceive him as an actual threat or just annoyance? Or
well,
like,
a speech in front of the UN, like he would have given Alaskan politicians and Hawaiian politicians a very clear avenue to make arguments to the government for secession in the future, which was really what his goal was. Like, you needed something substantive, a conversation to publicly take place that just doesn't happen.
Kareem, I need to clarify something. This the membership of that political party in Alaska, if I remember correctly, was in this order of magnitude of 100,000, 200,000, something like that. So I mean, at a time when the population of Alaska was what, 3 million, something to that effect.
They were a big. I mean,
that's
they
huge.
had some fucking
10%
sway in Alaska. Just 100 miles from here was the Alaska Jade Company, which used to take jade out of the side of a fucking mountain for like 100 years and make eggs with it. I have one in the other room. They used to have a sign hanging on the top of that fucking building that looked over the entire Seward Highway that said, Alaskans for secession, across the whole fucking thing. Thousands of people saw that sign every day. It's the most driven highway in Alaska. It's like, so like that, it was very popular in the state at the time. Like, and he became a firebrand because he was the voice for a lot of those people. But I'll play this. This is why he considers himself an Alaskan rather than American.
When something like that happens, and then you begin to wonder, and finally you say, why? Why do I owe that country anything? What they've done to my state, my country. What they're doing to it every day. They don't even give you time to forgive and forget. They come along with another regulation. But you get to thinking, well, why the hell do I owe them anything? And then you get mad. And you say the hell with them. And you renounce allegiance. And you pledge your efforts, your effects, your honor, your life to Alaska. That's how I do. I'm an Alaskan, see. And they know it. I've told them so, to go to hell in every way I can, in a nice way. I took a case to the Supreme Court, believing in the Supreme Court, that I'd rather be tried in a whorehouse with a madam as a judge. There's more justice. And if they don't like it, they know where they can go. I tried it. I believed in my country. I believed in the court system, and it stinks. They don't pay you for property rights they take away from you. We have patented ground that we haven't been able to use for 8 years. When you get a patent from the U.S. government, it says, and appurtenances. You're supposed to have access to it. We can have access during the winter months, customary winter months, when it's frozen and there's 12 inches of snow covered. That isn't access. You can't placer mine in the summertime. We put $300,000 in over there, and it's locked up, locked up for 8 years. My wife and I had a good time there. We didn't take 300, 400, 500 ounces out, a couple of kids. We had a good time there. They take taken 8 years of our lives. She'll never be able to go back to the creek with me. And if you think I'm ever going to forget that, the fires of hell are frozen glaciers compared to my hatred for the American government. And I won't be buried under their damn flag. I'll be buried in Dawson. And when Alaska is an independent nation, they can bring my bones home, back to my country.
Wow.
Yeah. And he was buried in Dawson, Canada.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And most people fucking like outside of the state have no fucking idea who that guy is. So that's my mission for the next few years, is to make sure as many people hear that as possible.
My mission is actually to get Leeson's work out there, Dr. Leeson's work out there, who's still alive, but it's very good. He's given the best speech.
Hey, by the way, I mean, that's there are a lot of great people. I definitely want to find out more about information about every single one of these people. You know, now that we're celebrating that we're not in a pandemic anymore. By the way, I feel like we should honor, you know, the doctors who basically
did the good
us
work.
whole routines that were not approved by the government that actually worked to save people's lives.
Yeah. So I think this is a good place to kind of close out his story for now. And I will say we're going to be having a long stream on this guy's history. And I'm going to be on a lot of other podcasts talking about the life of Joe Vogler. I'm making a lot of stuff about this guy, culminating in possibly a full documentary, but definitely some kind of writings. I think his work and just his opinions need to be out there. And like, I give it to the Independence Party, the Alaska Independence Party. His creation is still in operation in this state, and they still meet and they are still doing stuff. I'd like to see a world where them and libertarians are working together in the state again. So that would be interesting. And he's just somebody I like. And I think because he comes from this state, but also like his ideas are not just for this state. Like there's so much that can be taken away from it. Him going like, stop working federally at all. Like just stop caring about the federal government, work on your state, get them under your control. And once the people have the control of the state, it doesn't fucking matter what the feds are doing. Because you can leave.
Just as a passing note, Sarah Palin used to belong to the Alaska Independence Party.
I'll show you right. So they had conversations. She actually chaired the Independence Party meeting after he passed away. Their comeback party. I can bring this up on YouTube actually.
And funny enough, for such a very strong movement, she just lost an election in Alaska.
So people have to understand why that election was lost and what this all means. And the election she lost was not the general election. It was a special election. The general has not happened yet for Alaska. I think she probably still has a good chance of winning the general. And also this fucking chat is correct. There's going to be Where's Joe stuff. I'm going to be starting an interesting path with the Joe Vogler stuff that I've found so far. It'll be very interesting. So Joe Vogler died supposedly attempting to purchase C4 from another individual. Now, a lot of people equate that to like terrorism and stuff. It most likely had to do with mining.
Yeah.
And it might not have even happened in the first place. And there's a bunch of that stuff that we'll go into kind of in the future here. So this is Sarah Palin chairing the AIP. This is actually not after he passed away. I'm wrong about that. This is after that. She was chairing this before she ran or won. I'm not sure.
And I am delighted to welcome you to the 2008 Alaskan Independence Party.
Because this is a while after he passed away.
Let it play, Leighton.
Convention in the Golden Heart City, Fairbanks. Your party plays an important role in our state's politics. I've always said that competition is so good, and that applies to political parties as well.
Oh.
Sorry.
I share your party's vision of upholding the Constitution of our great state. My administration remains focused on reining in government growth.
I don't know why it's not loading. The video.
So individual liberty and opportunity can expand. I know you agree with that. We have a great promise to be a self-sufficient state made up of the hardest working, most grateful Americans in our nation. So as your convention gets underway, I hope that you all are inspired by remembering that all those years ago, it was in this same city that Alaska's Constitution was born. And it was founded on hope and trust and liberty and opportunity. I carry that message of opportunity forward in my administration as we continue to move our state ahead and create positive change. So I say good luck on a successful and inspiring convention. Keep up the good work, and God bless you.
Yeah. So that's actually her introing the AIP back then in 2008. So she was like connected pretty well with the group, and I think she realized she wasn't going to win office through them, and then she went full-blown politician after that. Her family, I mean, I lived not too far from where they lived, and her family has a whole fucking past. They're all, you know, druggies or getting pregnant randomly and fucking a bunch of, like, you know, the drama, family drama shit gets talked a lot more about in her space because she's from this state. But in all actuality, like, she's just kind of a soccer mom that got into politics. Like, she is kind of that demeanor. She's not completely an idiot like everybody pander as. That was SNL, like 100%. But she's also not a genius, and she's definitely not my favorite fucking politician because she's intellectually a bag of rocks. In Alaska, we have a guy named Chris Bai, who's awesome, and he's running under the libertarian ticket here. Was she controlled op from the beginning? That's a very good possibility. It's something I've written about in some of the notes that I have. But I don't know, because I have to talk to some of the people who were involved with AIP back then, who I plan on having interviews with, and kind of I've emailed back and forth with some of them who are members now, and Bob Barr and some of the people that I'll talk to who were around when Vogler was still a member and helped found it back then. A lot of those guys are still kicking, so it'll be good to talk to them and find out what their opinion on what happened was. But we're going to go through all of that another time. It's been an hour and a half. I hope you guys have a good night. Plugs, Hector Roos for Florida, at Roos for Florida. Follow that on Twitter, at Kareem for Liberty, and Kareem Mays on Facebook. And then Leighton Radner at Liberty Leighton on Twitter. And then JC said, to keep Alaskan independence in check because she suddenly had enough political sway to run for GOP VP. Yes, that would be exactly the situation. We're going to cover that next episode.